Excellent. That time having been arrived, it's Monday, October 16th, 2020 meeting. First things first, section 20 of the Acts of 2020, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, and the March 31st, 2025 extension granted by Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022 for the town of Bridgewater will be fully remote and accessible to the public through remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance is permitted to citizens who wish to tune in. Meeting may do so. So we've done our call to order. Let's do the first item. Approval of meeting minutes for October 2nd, 2023. I just have a question for the membership. Did any of you get a?
I did not.
Okay.
No.
So then some folks did not get it. I would strongly recommend that someone offer a motion to postpone them to our next meeting for approval.
Motion made. Motion to postpone the minute approval until next meeting.
Motion made by Julie,
I'll second it.
seconded by Lee. Can I have roll call, Ms. Green?
Oh. Mr. Pace,
Yeah.
Julie,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
and Joy.
Aye. Motion is approved. The minutes are postponed for approval until the next meeting. Next up on the agenda will be public comments. Anybody from the public may wish to do so. The floor is yours for the moment. Seeing as there are no members of the public in presence tonight, we will move on to our next order of business. Do we have any old business that we need to attend to first and foremost?
Not that I know of.
Alrighty then. I have an item, but I will put that forward as an additional item for discussion later on. So without further ado, we will move on to item E, new business order OFY24012, general fund free cash allocation. And Greenie here present tonight. She can fill us in on what this is going to entail. Just the brief description of it. The order goes, order that the town council assemble vote to move from general fund undesignated balance, transfer out of that balance $4,819,000 to the following funds: General Fund Stabilization Trust Fund, Capital Stabilization Trust Fund, OPEB Stabilization Trust Fund, Employee Liability Fund, One-Time Unforeseen Fund, and Opioid Stabilization Fund, moving certain amounts from the general fund undesignated of that total amount down to zero to bring that to the total that was being transferred. The explanation that we were given is recommended allocation of general fund undesignated fund balance, certified free cash to the established funds as noted above. And it's very good to hear that we got our free cash certified by DOR. So Ms. Greenie, you have the floor now.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you the chairman, Mr. V? Are you the VP? Yeah?
Madam Vice Chair for the time.
Thank you.
We reorganized at the last meeting, so Nate is still chair. I am vice chair.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Vice Chair. So if it was okay with you guys, I just put together a quick presentation on what the free cash is and what this year's is made up. And so I know we have a couple new members, so I thought.
Oh, perfect. I was going to ask for that. Not for me, but for the new people. So appreciate that.
Yes, I think it will be super helpful for our rather neophyte members of the board.
Okay, so I am going to, I think I'm going to share my right screen here. And share. So can you see my screen there?
Yes.
Yes.
So free cash. So what is free cash? So it is the revenue source. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because I can send this to you guys afterward too, or into the whole committee, just so that you kind of have an idea of what makes up. They call it free cash in the municipal world, but it's really your leftover retained earnings of any business. So it's made up of all the excess revenues and all the unexpended expenditures. That is certified when we close our books, and it's certified by the DLS under all the guidance and oversight of the local Department of Revenue, and making sure that our municipality adheres to all the government laws and things of that nature. So also under sound financial policies, which if you guys remember, when you start the budget process, you guys and the town councilors come up with a budget resolution that gives the town manager and the staff an idea of how much you were hoping to have left over. So, and most communities, under, a sound recommendation from the DLS and the climate in general, we are always projecting with conservative revenue projections and department appropriations, hoping that we have a little bit extra, to put in the bank, so to speak. So what's the process? So the process, it's ongoing all year long, but basically it comes from the point where we close our books. So the accounting staff and I submit a series of reports based on our, closing of all the revenues and expenditures. And we submit it on Gateway to the Massachusetts Department of DLS, Division of Local Services from the DLR. So they do a good check over and make sure everything is legal, make sure everything is proper. And after that point, they issue what is called free cash. So they'll look at all of our reports that we submit. And then they send a notice to the town councilors and all the town staff that, I don't know if you can see that. I wonder if I can make that bigger. Oops. No, won't make it bigger. But anyway, it tells, sorry, I'm going a little fast. I tend to talk fast. But the general fund and the enterprise funds, retained earnings are approved, and that means that the town can vote to expend this money, for whatever it deems necessary. We like to take free cash and put it into the bucket so that we're following some kind of process, which again is based on the resolution at the beginning of the year for the budget. So then the DLS will take all the information that we've submitted after they issue the free cash. And they have a wonderful website, and I can provide everyone, if you so desire, the links to the DLS. Has all of everything that we submit, it puts together very nicely some graphs and information. And this is one of the information things that they do. They take the last 3 years and they, put out how much we've got in free cash for the last 3 years. So how do we get the sources of the free cash? So this is what we work on when we close the books as well. And we're always projecting because we know the legal methodology of the Department of Local Services. So we're pretty good about estimating what we're going to be able to, get certified as free cash. So we put this together. And you can see which buckets have the leftover, the amounts that make up the 4 million that you have before you to put in stabilization and the other trust accounts. So on the next slide, I'll kind of break it out for you a little bit. But we have, non-revenue sharing and revenue sharing. And that's really when we have our revenue set up to work with the school department with the percentage so that we're fair about what the town revenues that come in, and we use these to have a fair percentage to share with the school as far as, you know, what is local and what is considered non-revenue sharing, which are like fees and certain departmental fees that just kind of pay for the departments themselves. So we kind of break it up a little. So, and I can come back and answer questions for you at the end of the slideshow. So the surplus categories, like I on the previous slide. So basically, you'll see the motor vehicle excise was a big we had excess of 668,000. Meals and room tax, we had an increase, and licensing and permits were increased about 470,000, which is great. Investment income was up too, and that was, we didn't expect that, but with the current market and the, the interest rates for financing. But our collector treasurer did a great job of moving some money around to get some good interest bearing. So we were fortunate to have that this year. I don't think in my 20 years I've seen that much of an interest investment. So, and then also we have miscellaneous revenues, it's called, which is kind of a bucket of things that come into the treasury. And by Mass General Law, we are not allowed to isolate certain revenues because it's a special coming from, Joe Smith or whatever. It's a donation account or a grant account that's different by general law, but funds like, for example, the police department had a refund from 2 years ago of some kind of equipment. So we've already closed out those we call it prior year. So we have to put it in this one year. So everything that isn't covered by a Mass General Law has to always go to the general fund. And if it's not, planned or budgeted or by a certain other restriction, then it's usually just like a miscellaneous. So that sometimes can be rather large. We had a couple things like a FEMA reimbursement of 164,000 that just finally came through, and that was from costs incurred by the town during that emergency storm called so these are a couple of examples of what is made up out of that money. And then the cherry sheets, we got an extra 24,000. And then our unencumbered and unexpended appropriations, which means all the expenditures that we budgeted, we had turnbacks of almost $1 million, which was amazing. But again, most of that actually was unfilled positions because the town's having trouble, believe it or not, hiring. Highway, we can't get people. Lisa down. We had a couple of other openings, so we had some money left over in the departments as well as the health insurance line that would have paid for some of the benefits. So that was a lot. And then also we did have some one-time SRF and agency closeout. So that SRF means it's special revenue funds. So for the last 5 years, I've been working with the planning board staff and a couple other people to go through some steel funds that we had, including consultant reviews and things from like 25, 30 years ago that we returned a lot of the money that was sitting there, but we did have some money left over that it just should have already been spent out. So we did identify those funds out, and then we had some old checks and tailings from 25 years ago that was sitting in the coffer. So, we worked hard with some of the other departments to research and do our due diligence and follow the laws of, trying to find people who never got checks from forever ago. And also some prior year roadway bonds that were held to DPW for, I don't know what they call it, outfalls and maintenance when new projects or new neighborhoods are built. They have to, save a certain amount of things before the roads were accepted, and years ago, for whatever reason, a lot of the money was already spent on the things that were outlined by the planning board and the ZBA for these particular um, projects and developers who we have the money that was spent on DPW and what to do this, but we never closed out the fund. So again, we did a lot of work with that, but that's what that's made of. So with that allocation, we just stuck through this percentage option that the town manager and the finance department have worked out, so that we're hitting our targets based on, again, the budget resolution that's accepted at the beginning of the budget year. And where we want our bank accounts to be, our stabilization fund. We want it to be at a certain percent of our budget. And then all the needs for capital, including the capital that's due to the school and our OPEB liabilities and the other obligations that we have. So that is kind of how we figured out how we're gonna allocate the free cash for you. So that is my presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Greenie. So I will open to questions and discussion for folks. If you have any questions about this proposal, I'd ask that if you are asking a question, ask through the chair, and then we will let Ms. Greenie share her expertise.
I had one question. If you could pop that back up on the screen for 1 second. I think it was the next to last page. I just wanted to ask a question.
You might need to reshare it again for the presentation.
Yep, that one. Perfect. Thank you. My only question was, should we be putting a little more in the one-time unforeseen? That's the only one that's negative, and there are several that are over, and it would be easy to cover that. So that was the only question I had.
Yeah, so actually it's under the target, so we were targeting putting 200,000 in there, but we did. The town manager felt that, we put some money instead, because we only had a couple of, so those are targets up here that you see. So this is just a target for the balance. So here's the actual balances, right? So as of June 30th, in the one-time unforeseen, we have 60,000. And we usually use the one-time unforeseen, obviously for, I don't know, what he uses it for, but contractual obligations maybe, or things that we don't see coming. But we try not to put too much money in there, because we're really good about trying to foresee capital things, and we're obviously working on estimating all of the buyouts from the legacy, and they're dropping off substantially. So, and we think that when we do the contract negotiations that are coming up, that we'll already have funded FY25. So we're hoping that this year, when we do contract negotiations, they're all up at the end of June. We're already going to be budgeting the anticipated amount, or hopefully we'll have the contract closed out, contracts already figured out by the time we do FY25 budget. So we won't need to go to any one-time money for that. That's the hope anyway. And also, the capital stabilization fund was a real important target this year, because we have a lot of roadway work to do, and you'll see when that comes before you that we're planning on. We'll see what the town manager has in store for the roadways, but we thought that putting, bringing that fund up to 3.5 million would give us a good target to do some of the things that we know we need to do.
I have a quick question. On page 2, I wrote down that I saw $250,000 in real estate property taxes is in red. I think it was page 2, right there, the top on real estate. Can somebody explain to me why I'm looking at $250,000 in red for real estate
So,
tax? billing?
so what we had on that, I don't have the exact analysis in front of me, but so that was based on, there were a few abatements that had to be put through. So when we do the original commitment of all the bills, we take exactly what, we're just so like on the numbers, like years ago, we didn't really go right to the commitments and everything. Now we're just so on top of it that we take all the commitments, we use the allowances, which means, things that we know we might have to either give people exemptions or things like that. But we had a couple of over evaluations that didn't come through until the reval. So, and they were pretty substantial. One of them was like $300,000 over because what that means is that the building they thought was open, but it wasn't open for business, so there's a different classification. So I think that was one of the reasons why it looks under. Although, what by the time we do tax liens and everything, and again with the allowances for abatements, we're in pretty good shape. So it did reflect that negativity number due to that.
Laurie, through you, MJ. So I noticed on the state reimbursements, we list the abatement separate. Is there a way to list it separately in that section too? Like, so that she wouldn't maybe have to ask that question, maybe? I mean, I appreciate the question, don't get me wrong, but I guess I question why it's abatements is separated in one category but not another. If
Yeah.
the answer is that number is related to abatements.
Really good. That abatement on this worksheet, those are reimbursed abatements from the state, which are like 2 years out. So every time we do give like veteran abatements or like property abatements for seniors for certain laws, meaning the assessors fill out a form to the state, like whether it's motor vehicle registry exemptions or real estate or personal property exemptions. Those are after the fact of our commitment. So that one has nothing to do with the other one in this.
Mhm. Right, but if we listed abatements up the top, wouldn't that change the negative 252 number? Like if you separated it and then we could see the difference between how off we really are, or no?
Yeah, I do see your point, except for the personal property, this is all fiscal 23. So
Mhm.
that's all this year, what we build out and all the revenue we got in based on what we build out. The abatements and the state reimbursements are like 2 years, sometimes 3 out. They've caught up a lot, but they're like 2 years behind in getting those money back, which don't have a lot to do with fiscal 23.
So do we have no way to estimate what that real estate billing number is going to be? Or do we have a better way to evaluate it, or it is what it is when it happens?
This is very unusual. This was a very unusual abatement, I guess, because it was for a rather large building at the top of Pleasant Street. That when the tax bills went out, it was billed like it was an open and operating business, and it wasn't. So it was rather large, and that really doesn't happen very often. The people that did the reval for us.
So will it correct itself in fiscal year 24 or no? We'll have the same.
Yes, it definitely will. So it was just, it would correct itself.
All right, thank you.
And the other thing to remember as well, Julie, is that even though this is the way this is, Lori, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but the Board of Assessors have usually an abatement overlay fund, and that usually will cover any deficits related to abatement. So if you end up having, say, the appellate tax board judged on a property that it was, a certain value, and that value actually costs the town more to issue an abatement, the overlay fund that the Board of Assessors possesses usually is budgeted such that it can absorb those costs. It could be one of those instances where that may be a little bit over, it may be a little bit less, but if I remember correctly, Lori, that is what the assessor's overlay is for. So this type of figure should not much of I'm not necessarily a panic, but certainly more of a concern or chagrin to it.
Yeah, and again, the overlay, it's usually like the past, like we didn't catch this right away, which, like I said, we're on top of it more than we ever were. It would have been fine, and then it would have sat in the overlay, we wouldn't have seen. But we just process it like very methodically, and the transparency, this is just whatever we do it. I think I have to change the wording in the state reimbursement. And this is kind of an internal document, so I apologize.
Oh, no, I appreciate the effort. It's just, we have new people, not to cut you off, trying to understand the whole free cash process. If we didn't have the money in free cash, where would it have, come from? So I think you just answered that question, MJ, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Ms. Claris. Have any questions?
I have a few questions, Madam Vice Chair.
Sure, Jim.
To clarify, these funds these were designated from the town council earlier this year as part of what happens when we have free cash.
So, when we vote the budget, there's a resolution passed that what the council directs the town manager and his team to put for them. Meaning, we're gonna increase our revenue by 2.5 in the property field, and our revenues are gonna be what they are. But we're very conservative, meaning like, so we'll have, at least that 3 to 5%, available after, we close the books. So don't forget, when you do your budget, we're budgeting, we start our budget now for fiscal 25, and then you guys have done this before you in the winter months, January, February, March, we're working to put all the numbers in front of you from our best projections. And then you guys pass it in April. And so this is like the 14 months later culmination of what we did back then and how the year ended up working.
So there was like, hey, if we get X number, or we'll put a percentage of free cash towards capital stabilization, another percentage towards whatever the free cash amount ends up being.
Right. Yeah. 80%
What?
We always want to have in our stabilization for obviously the but yeah, we also want to make sure we have a little bit of money to, help with the buildings or buying vehicles and all the things that come up with the capital that aren't part of the operations.
May I ask what the opioid stabilization fund is?
Okay, great. So that is a new fund this year. The state attorney general, who's now the governor, she added of Massachusetts to be on this, the states with that lawsuit. I think they spearheaded actually. So the big pharma companies worked out a settlement to send off to communities based on all the metrics that are completed by all the local governments and all of the hospitals and mostly not really sure who like determines what, but anyway, Bridgewater received, let me see here. So we received in this. Let's see. So in this, now miscellaneous revenue, we received 23,000, because we didn't have the opioid settlement fund set up yet. So, and you'll see in the order that we set up the opioid fund, and the money that we got in last year went to our general fund, and now we're gonna take it and put it in the opioid stabilization fund. So, that's probably gonna be for later for another time. I'm not really sure how much Bridgewater will get. I know like cities and, the big cities and the urban cities are getting a lot of money for these settlements, so. That's why they suggested, and the DLS suggested most communities, set aside a fund for that, so that. You can track those expenses or make your programs. We haven't really. Not with any programs that we're doing yet, but I know. And I know we'll be getting some more funds, but I'm not really sure how much. So we just.
So the expectation is the town will at some point do something with this money related to the opioid epidemic.
Whether it's a program for the schools or the police department, I know there's like a ton of grants too that the state's been pushing out, and like a jail diversion grant with the police service. Certain people that might come in, that they really need help, and there's like, they have wonderful coordinators that work with them, and they help try to get people who need some help into, places. So we do have that grant funding already in play, and I know most people don't even know about that. It does actually happen, but there are great programs that we are already doing with other grant funds. This settlement, yeah, so if the community person has ideas or, to do stuff, that's probably how you set out to spend some of this money. I mean, 23,000 really isn't a lot right now, but 23,000 to someone that's struggling, or a few people is it's a little bit of money. So whatever the program that is decided by the town, we will vote to appropriate that to whatever is decided.
Great, thank you. Those are all my questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hamilton. Anybody else have any questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion moved by Ms. Harris. Do I hear a second?
Second,
What was the
That
second?
was
Steve.
Mr. Pace.
Yep.
All right, Pace. Laurie, if you could do the roll call for us, please.
Sure, I'll start with you, MJ.
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
You see me?
Louis,
Oh, aye, sorry.
Brian,
Aye.
and Jim.
Aye.
Right, the motion is approved, unanimous. Now we have the next item, additional items for discussion. I do have one for discussion. Unfortunately, one of the members of actually two members of my subcommittee are not present, but folks, a little bit of a heads up. I would like to, in our next meeting, potentially talk more about how our subcommittee moves forward. I know it's been a few months since our subcommittee on capital expenditure and finance policy was able to do anything. And right now, just based on the conversations we've had previously, I feel like we may need an additional bit of direction or guidance from the committee to see if we should proceed further on the matter, just because of how things have gone. And I would look to the person, Ray and Eric would certainly agree with me on this. We'd like to figure out if we're just spinning our tires on this one, just because it's information is not necessarily as good as we'd hoped it would be, and we haven't really been able to get things to gel in a way that we think would be helpful. But that said, I'm going to be open to suggestions, and I will certainly hope that it is made note in the minutes that the chair would hopefully help us entertain that as an outside discussion next meeting. So I will let Nate know about that. So let's stay tuned for that. I would ask if anybody else has any additional items for discussion, please contribute them now. And you have
Yeah. Not a, something to discuss, just a kind of point of information that I saw that on Saturday, November 4th, from 10 to noon at the Bridgewater Senior Center, there's going to be an invitation to potential candidates workshop. So if anyone knows anyone that may be interested in running for any offices in town, might be a good time to get some more information on it. And I think Mary Lee might be running it, but it talks, there's a library position open, school committee, a couple of town council positions, and as we all know, a town clerk position. So we need the town needs all the help we can get. So if anybody knows anybody or wants more information, that workshop might, and it is on a Saturday, but it is 10 to noon. And if you couldn't make the thing, then maybe they can still reach out to people. Never too soon to start thinking about it. The election's in April. But
I
thanks.
do appreciate that, Ms. Claparis. I would certainly note that one thing to keep in mind, we try to keep it as less political as possible. So if it was any opening on committees, boards, or commissions, certainly jump in. We don't want to, encourage or anything that would be of a political nature, since we are a neutral committee in that regard. But I do appreciate you sharing that with us, Ms. Claparis. Does anybody else have anything to volunteer? Anything that we might even have for future discussion for the next meeting?
Madam Vice Chair,
Yes, Mr. Hamilton.
for your subcommittee, is there an opportunity for you to catch up newer members on the focus of the subcommittee, or could that be part of the presentation next meeting?
I'm glad you asked that. I can certainly give everybody a bit of an update. For those who are members, earlier in our fiscal year, back in, I want to say, actually, no, prior to the end of our previous fiscal year, FY23, the town council forwarded to the finance committee a proposal that would change capital expenditure policies as it relates to Bridgewater Rainham Regional School District. There was an issue that happened earlier in the calendar year, so refresh my memory, Laurie, I believe it was like March, April timeframe. Something got paid for by the school district. We gave them money for it, and that money may not have necessarily been spent for it, but we were properly informed in a certain time frame. But through discussion with the council, it was felt that this new policy should come into effect, so that not only are we properly informed and warned being done, but the town will also enforce the policy on their end of the border. Something similar to what Rainham was being told to propose as well. And for the purposes of the fact that it's a policy that the school district was looking for us to sign on to and enact, that was sort of the genesis for the town to bring it to us, because it was a financial matter and it would deal with how we expend capital expenditure funds when giving them to Bridgewater Rainham School District. It was something that we questioned, that if it wasn't so much requesting of another. So the district wasn't saying, well, you have to follow this policy for us in order for us to work with you. It was more of a matter of communications based, but ultimately it's a policy that the town would have to apply to all departments, not just how they operate with Bridgewater Rainham School District. And the disconnect was what created our subcommittee on capital expenditure and finance policy. And the goal of our subcommittee was to try to figure out a way, of how we could make that proposed legislation work in a manner that is both responsible and helpful both to the town of Bridgewater and also to Bridgewater District, where we already have that working partnership, that working relationship. Any policy used by the town, but also used by the school district, need to be able to meld with both sides of the border, as it were. And we were tasked with doing that. I, as the chair of the subcommittee, sent out public records requests to the school district, which it wasn't necessarily an immediate response, but we did get a response. The first response we got was rather vague. Basically just told, oh, what's a capital expenditure, what they do with it. It wasn't necessarily, here's our policy, this is what we use capital expenditure funds for in the case of A, B, C, or D. I had been very specific in my request. I probably could queue things up, but I don't want to necessarily belabor it for the period of time, just for length of brevity for folks, and plus Cliff Notes version. But ultimately, we're trying to figure out how to make this legislative proposal work for us as a town and allow us to maintain a relationship with Bridgewater Rainham School District. We are sort of at an impasse because we have not gotten the ability to have folks from the district actually. Every time I've asked Josh to reach out to them, some other new roadblock has come up, and we've not really had that kind of communication. I will say, from a standpoint of history, we have always had good communications with the district when it relates to financial matters, especially when dealing with the budget process. So I would not have seen it being unexplored territory. For purposes of us getting this issue resolved or solved, or send back to the town council and say, here's what we suggest you do with the proposal, and this will most likely be more beneficial. I'd really prefer to hear from the rest of the committee on how they feel about it after having all the information distributed to them. So that's what I'm looking forward to, Mr. Hamilton, and hopefully we'll be able to suss that out in the near, like at some point, that order, as it stands right now, we've basically tabled it for purposes of to work on it and bring it before us again. We have really no activity, and I would love to get this done because it's not a difficult matter, but it's a matter that I would like to see. That's pretty much the front nine, the back nine, and maybe the sit the lounge later thing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have any other items to offer for discussion this evening? Alrighty, well, seeing as there's no other items, we will entertain adjournment of the meeting.
Do you know when the next meeting is going to be? Sorry.
That's a good question. I would
Sorry,
think
I meant to
that,
ask before I cut you off.
that is a good question. Lori, when's our next council meeting?
Yeah, the next council meeting will be October 24th.
Okay, so we've already had our meeting that we would have before the next council meeting after that. When's the first one in November? Is that November 7th?
Yes,
Okay, so we'd probably want to meet on October 30th, am I correct? Do we have anything coming up in the meantime? No,
not financial.
not financially. Okay. I would say right now, depending on how council meeting goes next Tuesday, I would say we pencil it in for the 30th, and I'll let the chair and Josh know that we have it penciled in just in case. If you don't hear anything from Josh about a meeting, we won't have one on the 30th, but if we do get something, we will be on the 30th at our usual time, 7:30 p.m. And we'll take it from there.
Okie dokie, thank you.
You're welcome. Sounds like a plan. So that being said, everything else settled and done. I would love to hear an entertainment, a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved. Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, for stepping up. Ms. Carini, can you take the roll call?
Oh, Jim,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye. Oh, sorry.
Steve,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
MJ.
And I am an aye. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. We will see all of each other soon.
Great job. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.